As a platform to destroy Israel, President Trump boldly recognizes Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights. Thank you, President Trump.
Fox's John Roberts. Critics say such a move won't change the legal status of the Golan Heights, but it may help Netanyahu, who is in a tough re-election bid. News from Afghanistan a short time ago. U.S. forces say 2 American service members have been killed during a military operation there. The European Union gives Britain a chance to delay its exit from the group until April 12th if Parliament approves the divorce deal next week. Otherwise, the exit could be pushed back until May 22nd.
What the decision today underlines is the importance of the House of Commons passing a Brexit deal next week so that we can bring an end to the uncertainty and leave in a smooth and orderly manner.
Prime Minister Theresa May speaking in Brussels Thursday. A Senate panel gets ready to hold hearings on Boeing's 737 MAX airliners next week.
Traditional thinking has been that civil procedures are more effective because if criminality is at stake, there is a risk that targets may go underground, destroy evidence, not productive when the ultimate goal is air safety.
Fox's Doug McElway. Boeing is testing new software for the MAX jet airliners. This is Fox News.
If you have family or friends getting treatment right now at St. Luke's Medical Center in the Philippines, we want to connect with you. Hafaday, I'm Joe Guam. Thanks to our partners, we're bringing Mes Samoru to St. Luke's in Global City. I'll be playing a free show on March 29th from 2 to 4 p.m. in the St. Luke's Piano Lounge for all our Guamanians out there. All family members accompanying the patient are invited to join us, but seats are limited, so please tell your family to go to joeguam.com to register online and reserve your spot. This event is presented by Guam Windward Memorial. Special thanks to our affiliate partners, Stay Well Guam, Take Care Insurance, Guam Hearing Doctors, Lombard Health Eye Clinic, Guam Premier Outlets, and Coast 360. Our contributing partners, Moylan's Net Care and Data Management Resources. Our supporting partners, American Music, Fizz & Co., The Coconut Tree Company, Kadu Restaurant, and our promotional partner, The Point, Sidus Masids, and Biba Mes Samori.
I'm proud to be a Guamanian where America's day begins. And I can't forget the women and men who fought for my brown skin.
House Democrats investigate the use of private emails at the White House.
House Oversight Committee Chairman Elijah Cummings says the personal attorney for Ivanka Trump and her husband Jared Kushner, both senior White House aides, told the committee the couple is not preserving all of their official communications. Cummings says the account appears to violate federal records-keeping law, but the attorney Abby Lowell says Cummings is mischaracterizing his comments. Lowell says he was referring to Ivanka Trump's email use before September 2017. Since then, she has forwarded all emails to her White House account. Cummings also says Kushner's use of the messaging service WhatsApp raises security concerns. On Capitol Hill, Jared Halpern, Fox News.
The daughter of the late Senator John McCain takes on the president again.
Meghan McCain took on the president's comments about her late father on ABC's The View, saying she doesn't like coming to the table and having to do this every day. She added she is one of 6 and then proceeded to read her sister Bridget's tweet because she said Bridget doesn't normally speak out.
Mr. Trump, everyone doesn't have to agree with my dad or like him, but I do ask that you be decent and respectful. If you can't do those 2 things, be mindful. We only said goodbye to him almost 7 months ago. Even if you were invited to my dad's funeral, you would have only wanted to be there for the credit and not for the condolences.
During a White House event at a tank-producing plant in Ohio, the president complained he didn't get a thank you after approving the late senator's funeral. Michelle Polino, Fox News.
Travel experts say Hawaii tourism is at the tipping point. They're warning the island paradise is getting so crowded there may soon be no vacancies. Researchers at the University of Hawaii claim it's a case of over-tourism, and the massive number of visitors to the islands are overwhelming the state's resources, damaging the quality of life and the general economy. And stocks, a good day on Thursday. The Dow up 216 points. I'm Carmen Roberts, and this is Fox News.
Shrimp and guacamole for Lent at Subway. The all-new shrimp and guacamole combines generous portions of whole shrimp and a spread of guacamole served on freshly baked bread, paired with vegetables cut fresh daily in restaurants and sauces that are sure to excite your taste buds. Hurry in, it's only available for a limited time. Other fresh Lenten flavors include the classic tuna or the mouth-watering greatness of our seafood sensation. Don't forget the Veggie Max, a delicious and tasty vegetarian patty. Visit any of our convenient locations today. At Subway, you make it what you want.
The stations of Choice Broadcasting are celebrating April 2019 as National Earth Month with the return of our Upcycle Mascot Showdown. We've invited the public elementary schools to set the example and build their school mascots completely out of recyclable material. Stay tuned to our stations to see how you can vote for your favorite school this April. Celebrate Earth Month with our students in the 2019 Upcycle Mascot Showdown. Brought to you by the Agania Shopping Center, Lolita Kamet from Remax Diamond Realty, Sylvan Learning Center, Family Finance, and the stations of Choice Broadcasting. Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Second Amendment to the United States Constitution. And I have a piece here that emanated from New Zealand that just shows all of us who take a certain degree of satisfaction from knowing that we have a constitution that protects individual rights and freedoms, unlike most other countries in the world. Here's a reading dealing with New Zealand's new gun control measure brought about by the massive shooting that they had down there last week. And it goes like this is from the Washington Examiner. And it starts out that Anna Giartielli wrote, gun control activists are calling for U.S. adoption of New Zealand's new gun regulations as ordered by Prime Minister Ardern following last week's terrorist attack. And those regulations, paraphrasing, prohibit all military-style and assault weapons, which basically means any semi-automatic weapon. Now, most of our Tall Tales Radio international radio listening audience knows that a semi-automatic weapon is a weapon that for which the trigger must be pulled for each discharge. But it's semi-automatic because after each discharge, it's not necessary to cock the weapon. As an example, a .45 pistol has a recoil device so that when you squeeze a trigger, there's an explosion that propels the round out of the barrel and causes a recoil. That recoil causes a slide to slide back, causes the expended cartridge to be expelled, and a new chamber, as you were a new cartridge to be chambered, so that the next pull on the trigger causes another round to leave the barrel. So you have, that is a semi-automatic weapon. Some semi-automatic weapons are recoil operated, some are gas operated, but the principle is always the same. Now, it may very well be that Uncle Herman's deer rifle, which did not have a pistol grip, may have been a semi-automatic .30-30. And according to the New Zealand law, that would be a prohibited weapon. Anyhow, this New Zealand's new law is a quick reaction to what happened in New Zealand. Now, the New Zealand government claims that it will reimburse people for the value of the weapons they turn in. But here's a write-up on that. One problem, these calls reflect either a basic lack of understanding on U.S. constitutional law. That is, the people are saying, well, we ought to do the same thing in the United States. Or a failure to actually read the New Zealand regulations. I have read those regulations, and I am convinced that Ardern's new regulations would be patently unconstitutional were any state, federal, or local government to enact them in America. Here's how Section 3 goes. Section 3, the order rules that most semi-automatic firearms are now to be regarded as, quote, military-style weapons. The order declares that illegal firearms will now include a semi-automatic firearm that is capable of being used in combination with a detachable magazine other than one designed to hold a .22 inch or less rimfire cartridges, that is capable of holding more than 5 cartridges, and a semi-automatic firearm that is a shotgun and it is capable of being used in combination with a detachable magazine that is capable of holding more than 5 cartridges. So unless it's a 22, unless it's like that 22 that you had when you were 12 years old to go rabbit hunting, Real Joe Cruz, if it's a semi-automatic weapon, you can't have it in New Zealand. 5 cartridges means 5 rounds, and a semi-automatic firearm that is capable of being used in combination with a detachable magazine means that the vast majority of handguns relied upon by Americans to protect their families and homes. So this would not take into consideration a revolver. A revolver is a pistol that has a rotating cylinder. It depends on whether it's a single action or double action, but as the cylinder rotates, a new round is presented to the firing pin for detonation. But once all of the rounds have been expended, they have to be extracted from the chamber or a new chamber inserted, etc. So just not as facile as a semi-automatic pistol like the standard U.S. military .45. So under the New Zealand law, the vast majority of handguns relied upon by Americans to protect their families and homes would be covered. This is the key issue. Such a ban in America would explicitly conflict with the Supreme Court's ruling in the most relevant Second Amendment case, District of Columbia versus Heller. And don't take my word for it. You could read Antonin Scalia's rationale for why most semi-automatic handguns used to defend American homes are constitutionally protected. Well, I have read that, and of course, whenever I read Antonin Scalia's decision in District of Columbia versus Heller, I have a hard time getting past the absence of the word militia, but that's another story. Quote, there are many reasons that, this is what Scalia said, there are many reasons that a citizen may prefer a handgun for home defense. It's easier to store in a location that is easily accessible in an emergency. It cannot easily be redirected or wrestled away by an attacker. It's easier to use for those without proper upper body strength to lift and aim a long gun. It can be pointed at a burglar with one hand while the other hand dials the police. Does anybody dial the police anymore?
Yeah, I don't think so, sir.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks running around now don't know what we mean when we say dial, dial tone.
I think the rotary phone is long gone, sir.
Yeah. Okay, whatever the reason, handguns are the most popular weapon chosen by Americans for self-defense in the home, and a complete prohibition of their use is invalid. That's what Scalia said in D.C. versus Heller. This, the Supreme Court concluded, means that when it comes to comparing the First Amendment to the Second Amendment, quote, the Second Amendment is no different. Like the first, it is the very product of an interest balancing by the people. And whatever else it leaves to future evaluation, it surely elevates above all other interests the right of law-abiding, responsible citizens to use arms in defense of hearth and home. I don't think very many people on Guam are concerned with defense of hearth. You know what a hearth is, Real Joe Cruz?
No, sir, I don't.
Have you ever seen a fireplace? Yeah, probably in the movies, right? Well, that flat ordinarily stone or a piece of masonry at the front of the fireplace is called the hearth.
Okay.
And back in the day, you could put a pot of baked beans on the hearth to warm it up. So it was a key part of the home. The hearth was a key part of the home, as you might imagine. So that's why Scalia says the Second Amendment elevates above all other interests, the right of law-abiding, responsible citizens to use arms in defense of hearth and home. Now, even though we don't have very many hearths here on Guam, we do have a Second Amendment. Yes, the Supreme Court has declined to overrule state regulations banning firearm magazines with capacities of more than 10 rounds. But Heller's finding of a basic right to self-defense via semi-automatic handguns would proscribe a 6-round or more magazine capacity limit as unconstitutional. After all, that limit would effectively ban possession of any handgun. Indeed, that is why state magazine capacity bans are focused on a 10-round limit. Restrictions at a lower round number, such as 5 rounds, would effectively ban handguns and thus invite Supreme Court overrule of them. And there's another point that stands out from Heller. It's imperative that individuals be able to defend their homes effectively. Considering that trained police officers in firearms incidents miss their targets more often than they hit them, a magazine capacity limit of 5 rounds would degrade the right of self-defense to a level of impotency. In other words, you got to have at least 10 shots if you hope to hit anything. This is not ultimately a question of opinion. We all have our views on the Second Amendment and gun rights. Yet when it comes to judging New Zealand's legislation as applied to U.S. constitutional rights, the law stands clear. In the American left's salutation of this legislation, we're seeing another example of gun control conversations driven by a lack of understanding and European-style emotional response. So there you have it. Long live the Second Amendment. Okay, so much for the Second Amendment, and from there we go to what part of the program, Real Joe Cruz?
Zemi Ikutni, sir.
Zemi Ikutni. Zemi Ikutni, meet the press. So, you know the drill. We go through each of the newspaper's editorials. We examine them for proper use of the language, proper statement of the facts, readability, edginess, hard-hittingness, and relevance. And when we find one that's better than the other, and sometimes we can't even do that, we give that particular editorial the coveted blue star. And I don't know this, but I speculate that perhaps careers of editors rise and fall on the presentation of those blue stars. I suppose Mr. Gannett, sitting in his office back in D.C., wants to know every day whether his paper out in Guam got the blue star. And I suspect that the editor out here in Guam is a little bit shaky, thinking, gosh, I hope I get the blue star today. I want to keep working here at the Daily News. This is just speculation on my part. And after all, the name of the program is Tall Tales. Okay, so today this is what the Daily News says. Our view, new prison would solve several problems. That's kind of a no-brainer, I think. Governor Lulian Guerrero's appointee to be the next director of the says the next director of the Department of Corrections. No, Governor Lulian Guerrero's appointee is the next director of corrections. You never get that right. Director of Corrections seems to have her priorities straight. She recognizes two of the biggest problems facing the prison: overtime costs and the need for a new modern facility to house inmates. That grasp of the obvious isn't something that really would separate the new director from just about anybody else who knows anything about the prison. But she's right. The primary problem with overtime costs is the lack of corrections officers at the prison, often more than 100 officers short of ideal staffing. Now, I'm going to jump in here, too. The second thing that causes, that is so staff intensive is the layout of that prison. That prison is a design that perhaps would have been state-of-the-art before the turn of the last century, maybe in the 1800s. But they don't build prisons like ours anymore. A well-designed prison reduces the demand for staff dramatically because of the layouts of the cells and the guard control centers. So our prison is extremely poorly designed, if it was designed at all. I just have the feeling that somebody said, hey, we need a new building. Oh, let's put it over here. What do we need to what do we need to have? Oh, you know, bars and locks, stuff like that. That's what it kind of looks like. Samantha Brennan, a retired major from the judiciary of Guam's probation division, said overtime has been a historical problem. At a recent confirmation hearing, she said Department of Corrections recently paid $870,505 for overtime costs incurred since October. She changed officer schedules to 4 days on and 3 days off, which has reduced overtime. But clearly more must be done, namely hiring more corrections officers. It works. From fiscal 202 to fiscal 204, the prison cut overtime spending from $3.6 million to $795,861 by hiring more officers. Brennan also told senators that the prison has started working to get technical assistance to develop a master plan for a new state-of-the-art prison. Well, that's good. That's what we really need. There are professionals, there are people who know the ins and outs of designing not only a prison, but an entire correctional system, which takes into consideration things like probation, parole, intense supervision, incarceration, maximum security, on and on and on. And that's the kind of person that you need designing your prison. There's no one on the island of Guam who's capable of that, nor should we expect that there should be someone on the island of Guam capable of that. And it's in an island of 160,000, how many prisons do we design every year? There just is no demand for it. So you go to the larger cities in the states, there would be enough work to keep people like that busy. There's also an organization called the National Institute for Corrections, and that's a good outfit that has a lot of valuable assistance to people in the corrections business. Brennan said, we are overmaxed, noting that the prison houses more than 640 inmates and detainees. Now, I want to jump in there again, too. Having detainees at the Department of Corrections is a serious mistake. Your common sense tells you, well, you know, pretrial detainees and sentenced inmates, it's all cages and bars and locks, guards and stuff like that. It's all the same thing. Well, it's not. They're completely different, and they should be completely separate. They should not be in the same geographical location, and they should not be under the supervision of the same person. Should be a separate department. And I've mentioned this before. If I were designing, one of the things that I would consider would be to combine probation and parole into a separate standalone department, not part of the Department of Corrections and not part of the judiciary. Another thing I would consider would be to put pre-trial detention under the jurisdiction of the judicial branch, not the executive branch. But we don't need to spend a lot of time with that today. Going on with the editorial, although the additional facilities have been built over the years, it's largely done by converting buildings, offices, and program rooms to prisoner housing. And the antiquated facilities also contributed to the prison's overtime costs. Readily available modern technology would make it easier to staff the facility with fewer corrections officers. Electronic locks and comprehensive camera coverage, for example. That's true. A bigger modern prison would alleviate the constant problem of overcrowding. It would also reduce the number of corrections officers, also cutting overtime costs. A new prison would also mean improved security and reduce the amount of contraband brought into the facility. It's abundantly clear the government needs to build a modern prison, one that will remedy current problems and can accommodate increases in prisoner population in the future. The challenge for the administration and senators is where to come up with the funding to build it. Well, that's true. And once again, using my political prism, you remember that one, Real Joe Cruz, it filters out all considerations except the purely political. There aren't very many votes in campaigning for a new prison. Because your average voter would say, yeah, you want to build schools? I like that. You want to build schools? Maybe I'll vote for you. Even if you talk about a new tax or raising taxes. If it's for schools, you can call me in on that. But when the conversation is about prisons, hell no! No. Is that all you can think about is the prisons? Lock them up and throw the key away. There was the time not too long ago when the solution for, this guy, the smart money over here and the lazy boy, the guy that knows everything, pack them up and send them up to Goat Island. They can't escape from there. The heck with them. So there just aren't a whole lot of votes in campaigning for the money necessary to build a prison. Now, that's where the Daily News comes in. If the Daily News is right editorially, and if they keep that editorial fire burning, there's a possibility that there may be results. But it's going to be very difficult for a politician or a citizens group or anyone else to really stir up a lot of enthusiasm to build a new prison unless, and let's hope this never happens, unless something really bad happens at our prison, something like the Attica prison riots in the early 70s or something like that. Unless that happens, the chances are we're going to be stuck with that prison for a long, long time. Now, there is one little bit of good news here, and that is that if we did build a new prison, we could go with a standard design. We wouldn't need to have a special design to provide quarters for former lieutenant governors. But we'll get back to that a little later on. So that's the Daily News and the Post. Once again, the Post makes some good points, but there must be a populist or a lefty in that editorial board somewhere who sneaks in and will throw a monkey wrench in just about any editorial, like he did. What was that? Oh, yeah, they wrote a good editorial about the legislature rushing into the subsidy for GRMC. They very well put together logical, persuasive editorial and then spoiled the whole thing with the little lefty launch at the minimum wage and just spoil the whole thing. Well, you'll see when we get to the end of this one. Power rate for apartment renters shouldn't exceed normal residential rates. As Senator Tello Taitigui and the 452-strong Guam Association of Realtors have pointed out, the issue of hundreds of renters of apartments and other multifamily condominium units who have been paying more than the normal residential rate for electricity has gone on for about 15 years. The late Speaker Ben Pangilinan started to raise concerns that a segment of our community essentially has been paying commercial rates at certain apartments or condominium units. Then Senators Tom Adda and Dennis Rodriguez Jr. tried to bring up the issue, too, in recent years. Well, what happened? Guam Post, what happened there? Klitzkie has said that more than 600 families are affected, so she introduced Bill 37-35, which seeks to give these families a chance to get relief from higher than normal residential rates and be treated like normal residential customers. As an example, she cited the normal residential charge for 600 kilowatt hours, which is $15. The same amount of electricity charged at the commercial rate would be $34.80, according to Klitzkie. Now, I got to stop here. That $15 rate that the Post is zooming in on, or maybe this is something that Senator Klitzkie gave them, it could be deliberately misleading, because the first 600 kilowatt hours in a resident are what's called the lifeline rate. This is our attempt at socializing the rate structure of electric power. So although the residential rate is much higher than that, for those people who have a hard time paying for their electricity, that first $600 kilowatt hours is only $15, but that's not the entire residential rate. So a little bit misleading there, Guam Post. The same amount of electricity charged at the commercial rate would be $34.80, according to Klitzkie. Some agree with the Guam Power Authority that the issue of power rates shouldn't be tinkered with by the legislature because rate-setting decisions are made by the Public Utilities Commission. Let's hope so, because before we had a Public Utilities Commission and a Consolidated Commission on Utilities, the legislature did a horrible job of rate structure and everything to do with power and water, and we had a disastrous power and water system that is much, much better now than it was before. I'm going to come back to this right after a short break.
The GCC Votech Class of 79 is back. Join them on April 27th at the Onward Beach Hotel for a night of dinner, dancing, skits, and reminiscing. It's been 40 years since graduation, so take advantage of this once-in-a-lifetime chance to relive the memories. There's also a memorial mass on Friday, the 26th, at the Santa Teresita Church. Be there at 5:30 for candle placement in honor of classmates who've gone before. Tickets for the reunion on the 27th are on sale for $40 a person. For details, find Connie Keatigwa St. Nicholas at 488-6108 or Kathy Diaz, 777-3243. Be-Bus 79ers.
Discover a new galaxy. GTA introduces the new Samsung Galaxy S10 in 3 different sizes. The Galaxy S10 comes with cool new features like Power Share that allows you the ability to share your battery power with other devices. Or you can capture a wider world with its new camera featuring an ultra-wide lens for when you need to take pictures of the whole family. And with GTA's handset payment option, you can take home a Galaxy S10 for $0 down. Come into GTA and bring the Galaxy home.
We now return to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, soaring over the confusion with his superpowers of truth. Call 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
So, Klitzkie, along with the local association of realtors and others with the same goal, went to the Public Utilities Commission on Wednesday. Now, I'm going to poke them a little bit. It only took them 15. This is such a serious problem that it only took them 15 years to figure out what to do and to do it. Went to the Public Utilities Commission on Wednesday to hand deliver. Whoa, that tells you something. They hand delivered a letter asking the PUC to address the lack of fairness that's making it more difficult for hundreds of families to pay their power bills. Here, we're getting into it now. This is an issue that PUC cannot just rationalize in favor of GPA's arguments or brush aside as something the apartment renters and the landlords would have to deal with. Okay, I guess we're kind of prejudging what the PUC is going to do. We're talking in some cases here of power bills in the hundreds of dollars, comparable to what someone would pay for a major portion of a month's rent or a monthly installment on a car loan. Apartment renters are the least able to adjust their power bills because they can't just change out their air conditioning units and water heaters for more energy efficient units. It's not easy to tell apartment renters to just move to another location and come up with more money for a new space that has residential power rates. The fact that the fact that hundreds of families are hurting and have been for more than a decade should be enough for GPA and its governing board, the Consolidated Commission on Utilities, to come up with a solution. The fact that hundreds of families this is really persuasive. So if you would persuade a board or commission to take a particular action, it's necessary to show how many families are hurting. They cannot just opt for an easy way out. GPA has said bond investors from whom GPA has borrowed money frown on it, or that it's responsibility of the landlords to provide a way, such as providing individualized power meters to solve the problem. Ultimately, here we are. Ultimately, GPA's bosses are the ratepayers, and CCU members are answerable to voters who installed them to their positions. Their bosses are not the people in San Francisco or New York who get to decide how much more money GPA can borrow and what interest rates apply to the money it borrows. Yeah, populism is where you find it, and I find it right here on the editorial page of the Post. So what we really should do is we should go out of our way to diss the bond issuing and authorities and bondholders in San Francisco and New York, thumb our nose at them and say, we're not going to pay any attention to you. You guys don't elect us. We're going to do what the heck ever we want to. And when the bonds are called, and everybody and our system goes into a nosedive, well, at least we'll feel very virtuous in the process, which is absolutely the most important thing, apparently, according to the Post. Now let's go back and put in the facts here that the Post seems to have conveniently overlooked. They touch on it by saying, where is it? Yeah, I just saw it here. Well, the problem is this, that when a person builds an apartment building, when they build an apartment building, or they build a condominium development, they make a choice. They could wire that building so that there is a power meter for each individual tenant, or they could wire the building so that there is a single power meter for the entire building. Guess which one of those two alternatives is the cheaper? Yeah, it's cheaper to go with a single power meter. So in those buildings, be they condominiums or apartments, the landlord pays the power bill and recoups the amount of what he spends on power from the tenants one way or another. Perhaps it's just figured into the rent. It isn't even set aside as a separate cost, so that the rent for the apartment is $1,200 a month. And you see this occasionally in the papers. Apartment for rent, power, $1,200 a month, power included. Well, what that means is that apartment building has only one power meter. and the landlord pays the power and is able to recover the cost of the power from the rent. Now, you could assume that if those apartments had individual meters, the rent would be the cost of the rent would be cheaper. So that's the reality of the situation, that apartment builders and condominium builders make that decision at the time that they build a building. Now, before they can get occupancy permits for those buildings, there's a punch list they've got to go through, and they've got to let the power authority come in and inspect the building and look at their plans, et cetera, et cetera. And when the power authority does that, it makes its determination of the maximum amount of power that building can draw. And the rate structure is based on the maximum amount of power that the building can draw. Well, if you've got a 50-unit apartment building, that building can draw more power than a single apartment with its own meter. So the apartments that have a single meter are faced with that situation. And then, of course, there's no lifeline for these buildings with 50 tenants. So in a sense, that's a good break for the power authority because they don't have to offer that low rate. So that's what's going on here. Now, some people, would say, well, it's just not fair if I live in an apartment here and I have to pay X amount for power. Of course, if the building has a single power meter, those people aren't paying for power at all because they don't get a bill from the power authority. The only people who get bills from the power authority are people that have power meters. So there's a little disingenuousness here because this editorial presents people who are living in apartments and condos with a single power meter are getting power bills, but they're not. They don't get a power bill because they don't have a power meter. So what they want and what the editorial is attempting to say in a populist, misguided, perhaps deceptive way is to say that if you were to determine how much the power cost for that building would be if every one of those units had its own meter, that would be fair. Now, let's assume that we wanted to do that. How would you go about doing that? What would the mechanics of it be? Would you say that the apartment owner would be billed, would get a discount that would be computed based on the number of units in his building? And if you did, what would stop the apartment owner from saying, "Thank you, you just added to my bottom line"? Wouldn't you then, if you go along with this reasoning, wouldn't you then also have to have a statute that said the discount must be proportionately passed along to the tenants and owners in the condominium units? And then wouldn't you have to have some mechanism to enforce that, to make sure that it happened? I don't think so. We've discussed this. We've had Simon Sanchez explain it very, very clearly, as is his usual custom. And if we're to solve the problem, then it really is up to the landlords to install meters in each individual unit. But, of course, that costs a lot of money. And where would that cost ultimately go? To the people who rent the apartments or live in the condos. So I'm really glad that we have a Public Utilities Commission and that we're not subject to the vicissitudes of the, quote, idea of fairness as presented to us by Senator Tello Taitigui. I've seen some not-so-hot ideas come out of this legislature. I'm going to add this to the list, the not-so-hot ideas. So that brings us down to that part of the program that you all have been waiting for. I wonder what the size of the jackpot in the pool is, where our international radio listening audience try to guess which editorial is going to get the coveted blue star. I imagine it's pretty sizable, don't you, Real Joe Cruz?
I imagine so, sir.
Yeah, but I have a feeling that the regular players are going to have some long odds before they bet on the Daily News, because the Post, I haven't counted up yet, but I'll bet it's like 5-1 with the Post winning most of the time.
I think you're right, sir.
Yeah, but that didn't happen today, because today the coveted Daily News, a coveted blue star goes to the Daily News. A logical editorial expressing the policy of the Daily News for a worthwhile objective, put forth in a pretty clear fashion. No silly sentences or mistakes. Compared to the Post, which I don't know, they do some really good editorials, and every once in a while they really go off the rails, and today was one of those days. I'm not going to give them a low grade or something, but I ain't going to forget either. Okay, so after the Zemi-Kotny feature, we go from there straight to the card. And let's see, I got about 4 minutes before the next break, right, Real Joe Cruz?
Yes, sir.
Well, I don't know that it is the kind of intellectual pursuit that our international radio listening audience thrives upon, but I think the first item on the card has to be People of Guam versus Ray Tenorio. I just don't see any way of avoiding it. It is the lead story in the news. It's been something that's been percolating along since, I think, the 7th of July. It is one of those extremely important things that causes the tall tales to start a countdown or a count up. There was a count up from the day that the Glock party happened until the Attorney General actually charged Ray Tenorio with a crime. The only other matter that came within the tall tales ambit that was of such importance that there was a count was my vacation time.
True, sir.
Yeah. And there was a countdown until I got back. I don't want to equate myself with the Glock party. I don't even want to think about it. But we have a verdict. And the 12 men, as you were 6 men, good and true, brought in a not guilty verdict in the case of Ray Tenorio. I've already heard some people who, there were some saying, thank God, God is not stable. Some people are saying fix, and others are saying, well, it just depends on who you are, not what you do, and on and on and on. But I think the approach that I would take is the one that you would hear a United States attorney say on the steps of a federal courthouse after a jury has brought in a verdict against the United States. And the United States attorney would say, and when asked about losing the case, the United States attorney would say, justice is, as you were, the United States always wins when justice is done in its courts. The United States always wins when justice is done in its courts. I would steal that one and say the government of Guam or the people of Guam always win when justice is done in their court. And then that gets you into, well, what is the definition of justice? And justice does not always mean the so-called correct result. Justice means that you have a rule of law, that you comply with the rule of law from beginning to end. And I saw no reason to suspect that that didn't happen here, that The defendant in this case, Ray Tenorio, was afforded all of the rights of a defendant in a criminal case. He had a jury trial, and the jury came back and said, not guilty. We may have felt differently about it, but in our system, that's what justice amounts to. Okay, I'm going to come back to a little bit more Mano-gate. I've also got Vanessa Oshiro versus Clint, Governor Lou Leon Guerrero versus Frugality. So I'll be back in about 10.
There's a reason every day a Guam homeowner is getting a solar system installed by Micronesia Renewable Energy. It's because MRE is the most trusted name in solar. With more solar energy solutions than any other solar company on island, homeowners have a choice to go solar for zero money down or take the path to ownership. Whichever way, it keeps our skies blue and your pockets green. And with the most experienced solar technicians and an energy production guarantee, there are no worries. Call 632-2613 for a free consultation. MRE, the smarter choice.
In 1972, Jesus S. Leon Guerrero pictured a brighter future for our island and its people. With the trust and support of the community, he founded Bank of Guam. In celebration of our 47th anniversary, we're offering a Founders Day loan for up to $50,000, as low as 4.70 annual percentage rate. Visit any branch or bankofguam.com for more information. Subject to bank's lending criteria, terms and conditions apply. Offer valid until March 29, 2019. Bank of Guam, member FDIC.
So here we are. We got about 9 more minutes before that big, exciting halftime show that we've all been waiting for. And I'm going to pick up again on Mano-gate. Yesterday, I spent some time reading a statement from Mary Torres and a little bit of the findings of fact and conclusions of law produced by Attorney Mike Phillips. And some people would characterize this as a he said, she said. It's not that at all. It's more like what he did and she did, and who wrote about what happened and the interpretations that one could make if he read all of the things that have been written. And an awful lot has been written. And a good place to start would be Mike Phillips' findings of fact and conclusions of law, where he charges Bernadette Mano, Mary Torres, with felonies. Said that he lays out the facts and said this fact pattern gives rise to a felony. And he does the same thing for the rest of the other members of the Port 7. It's like 24 pages long. And I've pointed out, you got a member of the bar here who does this, whose professional reputation rides on this kind of work product, and this is what he said happened. Then we've got Mary Torres, who comes along and basically said, I really don't like Dan Tydenko, and I don't like Mike Phillips, and Mike Phillips submitted his bills late. And importantly, Mike Phillips, as you were, Dan Tydenko had several meetings in violation of the open government law. Well, if that's the case, then there should be a criminal prosecution for holding meetings of the Port Board in violation of the open government. And if one looks at the findings of fact of Mike Phillips, one would think, yes, there is reason to think that the chief prosecutor in the Attorney General's office, or the Attorney General himself, needs to look at this, because it's arguable that felonies were committed. So Mary Torres came back with her own spirited defense, and I mentioned that after Dan Tydenko had testified and was no longer in front of a mic, Mary Torres, who was a member of the committee, took the opportunity as a member of the committee to bash Tydenko, giving him really no opportunity to respond on camera. He then sent volumes of papers making his case. Part of the papers were Mike Phillips' findings of fact and conclusions of law. The The latest element here is a story on KOAM where Mike Phillips was interviewed. And the headline is, Mike Phillips ready to testify in favor of Dan Tydenko. Air Transportation Committee Chair Senator Tulina Nelson is sticking to her decision to withhold the nomination of former Port Authority of Guam Chairman Dan Tydenko to the Board of Directors of the Airport Authority. Nelson says while she understands the governor's position, and by the way, the governor came out after all of these things and said she still stands behind Dan Tydenko. Nelson says, the community has expressed grave concern. Well, the community is Bernadette Torres and a couple of other people. Interestingly enough, a couple of the really heavy hitters on the team of Lulian Guerrero came out and testified in favor of Tydenko. I'm talking about Anita Areola and Tony Stanford, two prominent members of the community who are close to the governor, and they came out in favor of Tydenko. But I also have to stop and add parenthetically now, this really isn't about who gets to sit on the airport board of directors. There's a Latin phrase. I don't like to toss these Latin phrases out. Get your Law and Order notebooks out, folks. Every once in a while, I'll toss out a Latin phrase that is useful in everyday conversation. Today's phrase is cui bono. Cui bono. C-U-I-B-O-N-O. And it's not about a popular singer either, although that would make a nice name for a popular singer, wouldn't it? And now we have that famous singer. She has appeared on radio, on TV, and in the movies. Cui bono. Cui bono, a principle that probable responsibility for an act or event lies with one having something to gain. So the way I read all this, it's not who gets to sit on the airport board. It's about who gets the money, because there's a lot of money riding on the reinstatement of the Port 7 to their jobs. The ones that the classified employees would be entitled to all of the back pay in an amount equal to the money they would have received had they been on the job, less a mitigation of damages, meaning the money they earned during that time. So we're talking about millions of dollars here. We're talking about big bucks. And you can't talk in those terms without remembering what appeared to be an officious intermeddler. That would be Senator Rory Respicio, who, when he found out that Nelson Werner, an assistant attorney general, had written to the executive director of the Civil Service Commission, Tony Lamarena, asking that documents furnished by the Attorney General to the Commission not be made public as having an adverse effect on the criminal prosecution. Rory wrote to wrote to the Attorney General, Lenny Rapadas. The very next day, Lenny Rapadas canceled Nelson Werner's letter. Very interesting. Bernadette Moreno gets fired, and where does she go for a job? Now, we'll come back to this after our big halftime break. We'll continue on with Menogate, and then we'll go to Vanessa Oshiro versus Clint.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Remembering the victims in New Zealand, I'm Carmen Roberts, Fox News. A call to prayer 1 week after the worst terror attack in New Zealand history.
New Zealand mourns with you. We are one.
Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern joining thousands who gathered in a park across from one of the two mosques targeted in the attack that killed 50 people.
It's Friday evening here, 1 week on, and that mass funeral taking place. 26 of the victims being buried here tonight in Christchurch, including the youngest victim, 3-year-old Mukad Ibrahim. It has been a very difficult week for the people of New Zealand, certainly the people of Christchurch. But today, once again, we saw them come together as a community and support one another.
Sky News reporter Greg Milam in Christchurch. Floodwaters start to recede in Iowa and Nebraska, but that is not the case down the river.
The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers says 200 miles of levees are compromised with record flood levels at 42 locations in 6 states. This amid new rounds of evacuation.
This is my 3rd time out, but I think this is going to be the worst.
There in Craig, Missouri, dozens of counties in both Nebraska and Iowa along the Missouri River declaring emergencies, with hundreds of structures taking on water and damage that's expected to be in the billions as water continues to rise also in several southern states along the lower Mississippi.
Fox's Jeff Manasso. This year's historic floods may prove the breaking point for some Midwest farmers. They lost most or all of this year's crops, and they don't know if they can plant in time for next year or if they even want to try. And U.S. crude closes lower, finishing the day in New York at $59.58 a barrel. That's down about 1.5%. The Dow gained 216 points, up nearly 1% to close at 25,962. This is Fox News.
Laddie Stone Entertainment and the stations of Choice Broadcasting proudly present the Miss and Mrs. Curvy Guam Pageant on Wednesday, April 3rd at the Sheraton Laguna Guam Resort. Tickets are $25 in advance and $35 at the door. VIP tickets are $50 in advance and $65 at the door. Tickets available at the High, Misa Zone, the Vault, and from any of the lovely curvy contestants. Doors open at 6 p.m. and the show starts at 7. Hosted by yours truly, Ryan the Mixologist, and the beautiful Liza Camacho. Special thanks to Pitbull Empire, Local Promos, Figure 8, One Punch Media, and the International Sports Center.
When your family needs medical care, how often do you find the need to visit multiple clinics? When a child has a serious ailment, do you find yourself meeting a medical provider only to learn you must go somewhere else for testing? At the FHP Health Center, you can find multiple specialties and testing services under one roof. And if your family needs urgent care, FHP is there for you with convenient weekday, evening, and weekend hours. Voted the island's best clinic in Pika's Best 2 years in a row. FHP, our island, your clinic. Learn more at fhpguam.com.
Opinion.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says the U.S. plans to ramp up pressure on Iran. He tells Fox News.
This administration has taken serious efforts across a broad range of threats, a broad range of efforts to Iran to extend its reach. We'll continue to do that.
However, there is concern among some American officials that such a move could put U.S. troops and intelligence officers at risk of similar actions by foreign governments.
Fox's Sean Langell. Pompeo's on a 5-day swing through the Middle East and heads to Lebanon next. U.S. forces say 2 American service members were killed during an operation in Afghanistan today. Spokeswoman says the incident is under investigation and has no further information to provide. A transgender teen in Georgia claims that his high school removed him from the prom king ballot.
Dex Fryer, who attends Johnson High School, tells the Gainesville Times newspaper he was one of 6 candidates nominated by the student body for prom king, but was informed by school officials he could only be on the prom queen ballot. Hall County School Superintendent Will Schofield says the district has never removed students from prom, and he doesn't want the district to, as he put it, be in the middle of a national, social, societal, and legal issue.
Fox's Lisa Lacera. The push to ban plastic straws brings about a new problem.
In the hospitality business, there is a saying that anything that isn't nailed down can disappear. And the latest item getting palmed? Metal straws.
I think a pretty easy rule of thumb is the shinier, the less you're going to hold on to it.
Will Wyatt opened Mr. Paradise but a month ago. He wanted his fancy East Village cocktail bar to avoid contributing to the plastic pollution crisis, so he picked up non-disposable straws for his bartenders, and boy, have they been evaporating.
We opened a month ago. I bought 96, and I've got 7.
Reporter Arthur Chien with Fox 5 in New York. I'm Carmen Roberts, and this is Fox News.
Help celebrate Earth Month with 93.3 The Point and the return of the Upcycle Mascot Showdown. Stay tuned for details on the upcoming live event and how you can support your favorite school. The Upcycle Mascot Showdown, brought to you by Lolita Kamet from Remax Diamond Realty, the Agana Shopping Center, Sylvan Learning Center, PBS Guam, and 93.3 The Point.
It's Micronesia Mall's 30th anniversary, and to celebrate, we are giving away a new Kia Soul LX, a Mazda 3i Sport, the popular Honda Civic LX, and 30 Manila Flyaways during our 30th anniversary Drive-Away Flyaway. Win 3 great cars from Triple J Auto Group, 30 Flyaways from Philippine Airlines, plus thousands of prizes from Burger King and Foot Locker when you play Micronesia Mall's 30th anniversary Drive-Away Flyaway.
Very good. Very good show, Real Joe Cruz. How do we do it every day?
Dry powder, sir.
Dry powder. Okay. Yesterday, everyone was waiting for that big bang, and the silence was somewhat deafening, wasn't it, Real Joe Cruz?
Absolutely, sir.
Yeah. It's a good thing you're so beloved by your fans. I think they gave you a pass on it. Okay, back to Mike Phillips here in his interview with KUM. Governor Lulian Guerrero said Wednesday she stands by Tydinko and is urging a review and vote by the full committee. Meanwhile, Port Legal Counsel Mike Phillips, who helped investigate the case in which 7 employees were fired in connection with a $70,000 illegal workman's compensation claim, says he supports the governor's call and would welcome a chance to testify under oath before senators. I really doubt that people are reading all the information that Dan has because it's overwhelming. Admittedly, it's very painful that people in the community, just like happened in the United States with Watergate, you just don't want to believe that people in charge would do such things. Do such a thing. Unfortunately, the information confirms that they did, said Phillips. He defends Tydinko, saying he didn't create this. It was dumped in his lap. He says the board had to make a tough call, but he believes it was the right one. All the employees that had those grievances at one point or another admitted exactly what they were accused of doing. Don't get me wrong, they didn't admit they had bad intent. At times they would say, I don't know why I did it, I just did it. But at one point, in all those transcripts you will find, or I'll find it for you, portions that say, I did it. Or, okay, I did that. So the board was right. The employees and former board general manager, Senator Mary Torres, were removed by the board. The employees are still challenging their terminations, but their cases have been bouncing back and forth between the Civil Service Commission and the courts. I already gave my lecture on justice today in the context of Ray Tenorio, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on repeating it, but we do have a system in place that gives a pretty fair shake to employees, government employees who were fired. It involves the Civil Service Commission, the Superior Court, and the Supreme Court. So that's Mike Phillips' statement. He says, if the committee would let me, I'd like to testify it. I'll show you where every one of these people have admitted to doing the things that they have been charged with. So we compare that with, and once again, this veered off from being about Danny Tenorio, Danny Tydenko, to Mary Torres and her relationship with the board, which took on a life of its own and seemed to be the central focus for at least Mary Torres. So Talina Nelson, chairman of the committee, says this is the basis for her decision to not forward to not let her committee take a crack at this matter. She says, but more than all the political back and forth that comes with an embattled nomination is that the reality that a trusted member of this committee has raised grave concerns about this nominee. In my personal experience, this member has been a cornerstone of this body through troubled times. She has repeatedly been courageous in the face of immense pressure and honest, even when the political winds did not favor the truth. So the most important thing to Talina here is apparently not the facts, but her personal relationship with Senator Mary Torres, which is exactly why I think it's so inappropriate for a senator sitting on a committee after the witness has testified to, in effect, badmouth him in such a manner that he doesn't have a chance to speak to a microphone himself in that same context. So the real issues here are the money that the Port 7 obviously are seeking in the Civil Service Commission and the courts. Mary Torres and Dan Tydenko's respective reputations. Mike Phillips' reputation, because Mary Torres has said some rather unflattering things about Mike Phillips. Another issue is it a good idea to have a board of lay people running something as important as a commercial port when we get results like this? Would we be better off under a well-designed program selling the port, leasing the port, franchising the port, etc.? This kind of stuff doesn't do anybody any good. It doesn't bring the rates down, that's for sure. So I mentioned the role of Rory Respicio. Obviously, it looks like he was able to get the Attorney General to call off his dogs when there was a potential prosecution. And the Attorney General at the time hasn't come forward to explain why that prosecution was deep-sixed when Nelson Werner was quoted by Mike Phillips as saying indictments are imminent. So no word from Lenny Rapatis. So then the next time Rory Respicio shows up is that when Bernadette Meno is fired, Rory hires her. And then the next thing that happens is that Rory's very first day in front of the board at the port, he says that he is going to appoint a committee to look into the terminations of the 7, because he doesn't think it was correct. So I mentioned before we have the Civil Service Commission, the Superior Court, and the Supreme Court, and now we have a court that's higher than the Supreme Court. It would be the Supremist Court, presided over by Mr. Justice Rory Respicio, apparently. So Rory said that's what he wants to do. He said, and his criticism was, when the port loses, all they do is appeal. Well, that's what people do. If Ray Tenorio had come out the loser in today's case, you think he might have appealed? Maybe. That's the way the system works. So you can't fault someone for relying on the way the court system is set up. And interestingly enough, the governor, Lulian Guerrero, said she'll let the matter proceed through the courts. Her lieutenant governor basically contradicted her by saying, well, you know, I understand they have a committee reviewing that at the port, and fairness is what's key. And, of course, the only way that fairness means anything in a government of laws is what the judicial system determines is fair after its powers have been invoked. Once you've invoked the powers of the judicial system, then to come along and say, well, I don't think they'll do it right, I'm going to do it myself. It's pretty hard to attach the word justice to that. So that's kind of the latest here on Menogate. Again, like Deep Throat said in the Watergate case, follow the money. The last thing I have to say about this is that you'll recall that after the election and before the inauguration of Lulian Guerrero as governor, by the way, is there something unique here with Lulian Guerrero being inaugurated as our governor, Real Joe Cruz?
She's the first female governor, sir.
Yeah.
In the territory of Guam. In case you didn't know.
Yeah, in case I forgot, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So between the election and the swearing in, I had the Tall Tales political intel line, which came in a very dense and difficult to decode messages, all of which were decrypted by Joe the Decryptor, also known as a Real Joe Cruz. And one of those early decryptions said that Rory was going to be the new executive manager at the commercial port. And of course, like almost, I think we were like 99% on target, weren't we, Real Joe Cruz?
Yes, we were, sir.
Yeah. So when I heard that, I said, you know, I got to go home and see if I could find my crystal ball. So I looked through my closet and I found my crystal ball, and I gazed into my crystal ball right after the Tall Tales political intel line told us that Rory was going to be the new manager at the port. I looked into that crystal ball and I said, this is going to be good news for the commercial Port 7.
I remember that, sir.
Uh-huh.
Way before it was even mentioned.
Uh-huh. And sure enough, Rory comes to that first meeting and says, I'm going to look at this, you know. Yeah. So I after I read Mike Phillips' statement here, this is the size of the Tall Tales record here of Menogate. After I was reviewing it yesterday after the program, I found my crystal ball again, and I gazed into it, and this is what I saw. Rory's name is going to pop up again very shortly in the context of Menogate. So you're going to want to make sure you're tuned in on Monday to see once again the fruits of the Tall Tales crystal ball. Okay, so I think we'll go from here. We're going to go to aphorisms, Real Joe Cruz. Are you ready for aphorisms?
I thought we were going to do Oshiro versus Rigel, sir.
Well, we can do Oshiro versus Rigel. I'll give you time. I know this doing the aphorism thing is not something that you take lightly. So, okay, we'll go to Oshiro versus Rigel. I suppose I ought to greet the folks that have joined us today before I go into Oshiro versus Rigel.
Welcome back.
Yeah, so Margaret Blas, welcome back. Buenas noches, and you did spell it right. And we've got Chris Abalencia, who feels sorry for New Zealand going down that path, and I do too. You know, I don't know if for those of us who are lucky enough to have ever been to what they call NZ. If you want to impress your friends as a world traveler, say, "Hell, I've been down to NZ." It really is a peaceful country, and people are really well mannered. A long time ago, I was down in NZ, and I took a public bus, and I left a really nice pair of sunglasses on the bus. Parenthetically, I'm pretty good at that. I lose stuff pretty regularly. And I left, this was in Wellington, and I left Wellington for the South Island, and when I came back to Wellington, I thought, oh, this is really a long shot, but maybe some honest person found those glasses on the bus and turned them in. Sure enough, that's exactly what happened. It was just amazing. You just don't expect things like that, but that's kind of my impression of New Zealand. The folks are kind and gentle, not violent, etc. It's a very peaceful place, and to have something like this happen there. Of course, the guy that did it was, as we would say in those areas, he was a bloody Aussie. He wasn't even a Kiwi that caused all the mayhem, but really a tragedy, certainly. So then we've got Margaret Bloss watching and listening from my TV here at Cypress, California. Wow. Okay, let's hear it for Cypress. Time here is 11 p.m., March 21. Nice to be back listening to you, Mr. Klitzkie. Well, we're glad to have you back on board, Margaret, all the way from Cyprus, staying up kind of late to watch Tall Tales, right? And Jose Martinez tells us that New Zealand is acting like the Guam legislature. Knee-jerk. Tom Van Engen, I just read today a very tiny minority of gun deaths are from rifles of any kind. Gun control fans have their minds made up and don't want to be confused with facts. So all you have to do is say assault rifle. And we've talked before about dog whistle, but the words assault rifle are definitely a dog whistle for those over there on the left. Then we have something from someone named Joe Cruz. Just to set the record straight here, this is not you, is it, real Joe Cruz?
No, there's a million Joe Cruzes, sir.
Yeah, but there's only one real Joe Cruz.
You're right about that.
Yeah. Okay, so this is another Joe Cruz. And another Joe Cruz says, proof that you don't need drugs to do crazy things. But if the shooter had some weed, he would have stayed home and ate Cheetos. Well, I can't resist this. Cheetos aren't good for you either. Too much salt and too much saturated fat. And there are lefties who would say, yeah, we ought to ban marijuana is okay, but we ought to ban Cheetos and big soft drinks, right? Jose Martinez, who usually has some clever things to say in response to another Joe Cruz, says, babysitting tips? And then Jose comes back and says, we need an Alcatraz. Cocos Island, you are on notice. Chris Abalencia has a link to YouTube, which you folks out there in our international radio listening audience are encouraged to watch and perhaps call and comment, because I'm not in a position to play a YouTube and comment on it and do all of the things I need to do here at Tall Tales, including riding herd on the real Joe Cruz. I've got to kind of concentrate my efforts here. Jose Martinez says, Thunderdome. 2 men enter, 1 man leaves. The old trial by ordeal. Another Joe Cruz says, if the gun don't fit, you must acquit. I think it was the glove that didn't fit, but pretty good. Good play on words, another Joe Cruz. Jose Martinez, does it seem that the confirmation committee was really an investigating committee at the Port Authority, rendering a verdict solely on that situation rather than truly focusing on Dan Tydenko? Yeah, and obviously there were some who would use what they saw as the malfunctions at the port as a sufficient rope to hang Dan Tydenko with. Okay, and then Jose Martinez, at least Senator Nelson's report had some interesting conclusions where conclusions have not been rendered yet. Joe Cruz, things are not always what they seem. For instance, whatever it is, I think I sometimes see a Tootsie Roll. Jose Martinez, Jose Martinez comes back and says, that's kind of disturbing, and it explains a lot at the same time. And we've got another Joe Cruz. We can build a new prison with cannabis taxes. We can also build the new Robert Klitzkie Territorial Library. Whoa. It's really, really appealing to my my ego there, isn't it?
Sign the petition, sir.
Yeah.
Just sign it.
What could be a greater tribute to someone than to have a library named after him, huh? Yeah, very interesting, another Joe Cruz. Jose Martinez, conspiracy alert. After voting in the legislation of recreational marijuana, the legislatures will utilize marijuana revenue to justify voting on giving themselves a salary increase. So I've heard. Yeah, okay. You heard it from Jose Martinez. And there is one thing I do want to add here on Menogate. I should have added it before I rested. And that is that you have Mike Phillips putting out a document that alleges the commission of several serious crimes. You have Mary Torres coming out and ex cathedra and in a document alleging several serious crimes. You have evidence that the Attorney General of Guam started a prosecution and then junked it before it went anywhere. I would suggest that this particular situation cries out for action from our current Attorney General. I would think that given the publicity that these things have been given, the fact that there is so much writing from responsible people, that the Attorney General ought to investigate all of these allegations that have risen to the surface. I don't see any other way of putting all these things behind us. Danny Tydenko, even if he is confirmed to the airport board, has taken some pretty heavy hits, and it might be difficult for him to recover from them. If he doesn't get confirmed to the airport board, that would be true in spades. So as I mentioned before, this whole thing has a dimension far beyond the question of who gets to sit on the airport board. And I would respectfully urge the Attorney General of Guam to go through all those papers and determine whether or not criminal prosecutions lie for any of the alleged criminal conduct that he would find in those papers. So, enough. From there, I go to Vanessa Oshiro versus Clint. We had Vanessa on the phone here the other day. It'd be really nice if she could call us again, but she called up and told us that she thinks that legalizing recreational marijuana would be a serious disaster for the people of Guam. She made some pretty good points. She had some bad personal experience that she shared with us. And now I have a story in the Post that says, quote, I just signed the petition. Vanessa L. Oshiro, DVM, people of Guam, against the legalization of recreational marijuana, and wanted to see if you could help by adding your name. And so begins an effort to thwart a bill that would allow use of marijuana for adults aged 21 and older. Bill 32-35, introduced by Senator Clinton Rigel, is on the schedule to be discussed by senators during session this week. The bill, known as the, quote, Guam Cannabis Industry Act of 2019, aims to create a new industry, spur new revenues, and create new jobs for the island of Guam. The petition, created by local veterinarian Vanessa L. Oshiro, has a modest goal of 100 signatures. In it, Oshiro and her co-writer point to crime levels she says, at least in part, are connected to illegal drug use. The island of Guam is currently experiencing a meth and cocaine epidemic, the petition states. Almost daily in connection, we read of burglaries, violence raids, and children being victimized by drug users abusing both these drugs as well as marijuana. The petition asserts that these drug-related crimes contradict claims by powerful marijuana lobbyists. Now, I wonder who that would be. Powerful marijuana lobbyists. Marijuana is very addictive and far from benign. This is a quote. As quoted from SD Med 2015 spec number 58-62. Okay, we've got the seventh inning stretch coming up. I didn't notice that Jack Haddock had suited up for today's game. So we'll just go through the seventh inning stretch, and we'll be jackless today.
Attention homeowners, MRE solar energy systems now come with battery storage for zero money down. This means that your home will have power even when the island power isn't available, like during power outages or during and after storms. The inconvenience of not having power for your home is a thing of the past. It's solar with battery storage exclusively by Micronesia Renewable Energy. Don't be left in the dark. Call 632-2613 for a free consultation. MRE, the smarter choice.
Save big. Save really big when you bundle up your insurance policies with Nanbo Insurance. Insure your home, auto, motorcycle, or business with Nanbo and enjoy great savings, up to 50%. When it comes to insuring your property, no one knows better than the company with over 50 years of service to the community. Don't compromise the things that matter to you most. Call Nanbo today at 477-9754 or visit nanbo.com for more information. Nanbo Insurance, serving you since 1968.
Breaking news, Jack Haddock just suited up, ran out in the field as he was pulling his trousers up and buckling his belt. He slipped on his glove and caught that long fly ball on a dead run.
Nice. I guess he's not playing for the Commission Cubs.
No, he says, hey, everyone, I'm down with the Tall Tales Tigers.
Nice.
Yeah, well, welcome back, Jack. The game just isn't the same without you. So the legendary Jack Haddock Mena Trace. All right? Okay, so going from one Jack to another. Hi, Jack.
Oh, good afternoon, Bob. How you doing?
Good.
Well, a legend in the sport that we love retired today. or should I say yesterday, right?
Yeah.
Hiro Suzuki hanged it up in Tokyo during the opening series. So, what a legend. This is an amazing player. And so, yeah, so me and my boss are going to have a little dinner down here in Tamuning. One of the restaurants down here has baseball memorabilia for the Tokyo Giants and a lot of the Tokyo teams.
Hey, Jack?
Yeah?
Could you hold the mouthpiece a little bit farther from your mouth? You're kind of garbled.
Yeah, I think it's my phone. Yeah. Hello?
Yeah, I'm here.
How do I sound now?
Better.
Yeah. No, the legendary Ichihiro retired, so we're just going to have a little dinner down here at one of the restaurants that has Tokyo Giants memorabilia. And so, what a great career. Once in a lifetime player they're going. And so, yeah, that's about it. I was going to ask you a baseball question, though.
Well, if it's not too hard, I'll take a swing at it, Jack.
Sure. You think Pete Rose should be in the Hall of Fame?
I wouldn't say no. I'd say hell no.
Okay.
Not even close. He should be in prison is where he should be.
Yeah, you know, he's a lot of people have grown soft now and think that the time has passed and that, you know, he should be in there. I'm still on the fence on it. I don't know, but I do know that Ichihiro is a first ballot Hall of Famer, and so there'll be quite a time when his numbers caught up there to Cooperstown. So I was just wondering because you know, when Pete Rose was asked about Ichihiro, he says, his numbers shouldn't count because he played in an inferior league over in Japan. So I was just wondering what you thought about that and, you know, the different changes in baseball as we progress.
Well, about an inferior league in Japan, this is what I have to say about that, Jack. Hi, watashi wa Nihongo wakarimasen.
Okay.
Ask one of your Japanese friends what that means, okay?
Yeah. Did you remember that famous interview that Ichihiro had with Bob Costas? And when he asked him what was the most famous phrase that he can remember in English? Well, it's kind of like sort of bluish. So I'm not going to repeat it, but it was so hilarious when he said it.
Okay,
it had to do with Kansas summertime and the heat and two rats in a wool sock, but I'm not going to mention it. But anyways, I just wanted to call to wish you a great weekend. I've been listening on the drive. The drive was pretty smooth heading north, and just pulling into the sushi restaurant where the memorabilia is. Going to take some pictures, eat some sushi, and make my way home. And, you know, I've been listening and just wanted to call to wish you a great weekend. And hats off, Jack Haddock, but hats off and a courtesy bow to the great player, Ichihiro Suzuki.
I'm still betting on Jack. Thanks for calling, Jack.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you. Okay, today it's, you know, in some poker games, you have to, before you can place a bet, you have to have a couple of jacks. So the rule is jacks are better to open, right? So today we had jacks are better, right? Okay. So going back to Vanessa here, marijuana is very addictive, and many recreational users in California, Colorado, Washington, Alaska, and the District of Columbia are experiencing severe mental health consequences, the petition states. Reputable studies have shown an increase in depression, anxiety, and schizophrenia amongst those who have used marijuana for long periods, even to the point of permanent loss of IQ and irreversible changes in the brain. I don't have any to lose. So, people against legalization of recreational marijuana, if you have an overpowering desire to go online and sign Vanessa's petition. And Vanessa, if you want to call in and give us a few words of wisdom, you're certainly more than welcome to. My analysis is this, that the marijuana bill didn't come up for debate yesterday. It is up, I understand, for today, but my suspicion is this, that members are now scrambling around looking for cover, because other than the six that sponsored or co-sponsored, other folks are saying, this is too much of a hot potato. I can't see that politically I'm going to gain anything by identifying with this. There's a potential loss. So what I'm looking for is cover. And cover in this situation means a reason to avoid voting for the bill without coming out and saying, I'm not voting for it because I don't like it. Something like, I'm not against the bill, but I think we should pay a lot of attention to the Guam Hotel and Restaurant Association and the Guam Visitors Bureau. That would be an example of cover. And the best example of cover I think that I've ever given on the show was the movie Miracle on 34th Street, which comes around every Christmas time. Next Christmas, make sure you watch Miracle on 34th Street, where a judge had to decide whether a man really was Santa Claus or really was nuts. And the guy presented a pretty good case that he really was Santa Claus. But, you know, we all know, by the way, if any children are watching, please show them out of the room. But kids love this program, you know, especially when they can watch it on Facebook. The judge figured, I got to stick with reality here, and he's going to rule against the man and say, no, there is no Santa Claus, until his political advisor said, Judge, you know the elections are coming up next month. Do you really want to go into an election after you've spoiled the Christmas of every kid in this town? The judge said, good point. So they go back into court, and it just so happens that a lot of people had written letters to Santa Claus about this case, and the post office department didn't know what to do with all these letters addressed to Santa Claus. So right after court goes back into session, a couple mailmen come in with huge mail bags and dump all these letters out addressed to Santa Claus. And the judge says, well, who am I to argue with the United States Postal Service, the United States Post Office? If the post office thinks you're Santa Claus, you're Santa Claus. Case dismissed. Classic case of cover. Well, the post office isn't going to be any help to the members of the 35th Guam legislature, but my analysis is that they are scampering around looking for cover right now, and the result would be that if they find that cover, perhaps the bill should be referred back to committee to allow the chairman to do a little more research and to answer some of these questions. Then the chairman has got a couple of choices. He can butt his head against the wall again, or let it go and hope that the whole idea slowly recedes out of the memories of the people who have been following this controversy. That would be the safe way. So, Vanessa, how many times, Real Joe Cruz, how does that one go where we talk about the Constitution? Remember that? You always have a pithy aphorism to add. We have a Constitution and laws, but remember about informed citizenry?
Oh, yeah, an active and informed citizen. It's not just a right, it's a duty.
So, but to being an active and informed citizen is not just a right, it's a duty.
It's a duty.
So Vanessa is complying with her duty as made known to us by the Real Joe Cruz. Okay, so we've got about 15 more minutes. I'm going to start on the last item on the card here, which I have titled Lou versus Frugality. Lou being Governor Lou Leon Guerrero. You don't need to tell me again that she's the first female governor of Guam. Poor as my memory is, I still remember that. So there's a story in the newspaper that I'm going to have to connect with Lou Leon Guerrero, so bear with me. The story deals with Bill 15-35. 1535 was on the agenda yesterday, and it passed. So that means it's going to be sent to Governor Lou Leon Guerrero. And the bill appropriates $298,536 for fiscal 2019 and $109,650 to pay for prior year obligations. But for this year, it's about $300,000 to run the election commission. So is that a good use of our money? Now, if you looked at the committee report of the bill, there are 13 employees at the Guam Election Commission. So obviously 13 employees have the ability to do the necessary work to pull off a primary election and a general election. 13 is enough. Okay, so the last election that we had was in November, and we're not going to have another election until a year from August. So if 13 people are enough to conduct those two elections, how many people do we need at the Election Commission when there are no elections? What do you think, Real Joe Cruz?
None?
Yeah. if that's what they're there for, is to conduct elections.
Man, Bob, you're so frugal.
Well, you know, it ain't my money. You know, if there isn't an election, then we perhaps don't need 13 people. Now, there may be some housekeeping that needs to be done. I suppose someone has to take out the ashes and make sure that the hearth is uncluttered, right, Real Joe Cruz? So there might be a need for one or two people, and I suppose it's pretty hard for the executive director to be re-recruited every time we have an election, but 13 people is way, way too many. Oh, that's bad enough. But even worse is this. I have an article from the Post dated November 27, 2018. Now, you won't find what the Post article says in the committee report that Joe San Augustine did for this bill. The commission is seeking adjustments for 13 employees as part of the $300,000 in additional appropriations beginning in January. Additional personnel costs constitute about a third of that request, or $98,212. The remaining will pay for operations and prior year obligations. Okay. If approved, the supplemental request will cover, as you were going on to the 13 employees, all GEC employees are unclassified. As part of procedure, employees will be terminated and then rehired with new titles and pay increases if all the supplemental funds are approved. So what we have here then is we have an appropriation of about $300,000, which is enough to carry the Guam Election Commission through the next fiscal year. But included in that $300,000 is $98,212 that would would provide for salary increases for the employees, the 13 employees. And the way that would be done is they would have to be terminated and rehired at the new rate. Okay, so we got 10 more minutes. I think I can wrap this up in 10 more minutes. We'll save the aphorisms until Monday. I really want to wrap this up before we quit.
Lent-friendly burgers at Chili's. Indulge in a selection of our famous burgers with a black bean patty. Black bean patties combine beans with onions, parsley, bell peppers, and cilantro. Served with dill pickles and fries. More Lenten entrees include the spicy shrimp tacos, Cajun pasta with shrimp, or grilled ancho salmon. Best of all, each entree is just $15 and comes with a refreshing Coca-Cola, iced tea, or Heineken on draft. Our fresh house salad with an entree for just $15. Chili's 3 for Me Lent menu. Available for a limited time. Chili's. More life happens here. Attention homeowners, if you don't have a solar energy system on your roof from Micronesia Renewable Energy, now is the time to get one. MRE solar energy systems now come with battery storage for zero money down. This means that your home will have power even when the island power isn't available, like during power outages or during and after storms. The inconvenience of not having power for your home is a thing of the past. Don't be left in the dark. Call 632-2613 for a free consultation. MRE, the smarter choice.
So it's the home stretch, and I'm going to wrap it up here with this bill that would provide for raises for the 13 unclassified employees at the Election Commission, the need for which I think is undetermined. The necessity to give them a raise, I think, is non-existent. I don't think the Election Commission has ever had any trouble hiring people. The Election Commission being composed of politicians, I suspect that most of the folks at the, and this is just a speculation, are there because of their political connections with one of the parties. They have no expectation of continued employment, and because they're not classified employees, they don't get salary increments. There's no promotional structure, et cetera. So the director of the Election Commission, I guess with the board's approval, decided it's time to give these folks a raise. Well, given all of the financial hardships that we've been through, I would put this question to you. Given the fiscal situation of the government, who should get a raise right now? And my first answer would be about the same as whether or not Pete Rose should be admitted to the Hall of Fame. But to say that we're going to give these unclassified employees raises when others are in a situation where their employment is perilous because of the poor financial situation of the government is just completely irresponsible. And that's why this is Lou Leon Guerrero versus frugality, because this bill was passed by the legislature and it now goes to the governor. And here's an interesting part of our Organic Act, 48 United States Code 1423I. If any bill presented to the governor contains several items of appropriation of money, he may object. Now, the Organic Act should be rewritten instead of saying he may object. What should it say, Real Joe Cruz?
They.
Yeah. They may object to one or more of such items or any part or parts, portion or portions thereof, while approving the other items, parts, or portions of the bill. In such a case, he shall append to the bill at the time of signing a statement of the items or parts or portions thereof to which he objects, and the items, etc., so objected to shall not take effect. So what that means is this: the governor can borrow that black marker from Fernando Esteves, and he can go through and draw a line through that $298,536 appropriation and make a pen and ink correction and write in the amount that it should be without those raises, and also attach that to his veto message, and then those raises won't apply. And while he's at it, the governor ought to do she ought to do some research to figure out how many employees are really necessary when there's no election this year, and reduce the entire appropriation by that amount. So by doing that, the governor would show us that she is frugal and that she's taking into consideration that this is the people's money. It's not the folks that work at the election commission's money. It's all our money, and we don't have enough of it to go around, and we've heard nothing but that since the so-called Trump tax cuts. So, Governor Leangaro, this is your opportunity to show us that your campaign rhetoric was just empty rhetoric. It's also your opportunity to show us that you can make a hard decision and resist the temptation of pandering to a small group of individuals. In other words, in this case, signing this bill into law would amount to pandering to the 13 employees at the Election Commission so they can continue on for another year in which there is no election and make more money doing it. The same kind of pandering that caused the governor to pull the rug out from under Ray Topasnia, the director of Gura, when he said, we're sitting on a really valuable asset here at Guma Tranquilidad. We could liquidate that asset, and instead of providing housing for 54 people, we could provide housing for thousands. But Lou went down there, and, when she was looking face to face at the 54, the desire to pander apparently was too much for her to bear. And she says, you people aren't going to have to move anywhere. So you put you put the 54 who are living in a luxurious location, you put that ahead of the thousands that could be housed if there were responsible use of our resources. And that's what your citizens are looking for, Governor, a responsible use of our resources. If there's no work at the Election Commission between elections, then let's not appropriate enough money to conduct an election. And let's not give these unclassified employees a raise when no raise is warranted at a time when we're in such a financial situation that the last legislature, a Democratic legislature, suspended salary increments. You remember that. So what we've seen from this governor is that the last legislature said no more deputy directors. She appointed several before the ink was even dry on her certificate, on her the sworn oath, pandering to the folks down at Guma Tranquilidad, and let's see if she continues here with this Bill 15. If she reduces those appropriations, which is her prerogative under the Organic Act, I will finally say, well, maybe there will be actual change in this administration, not just a lot of unfulfilled promises. Okay, that's it for this weekend. The Real Joe and I are going to struggle along with no tall tales for 2 days, but we'll be back on Monday. We'll see you then.